Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. In this episode, I'm joined by Ari Supran, CEO of Sonance, iPort, and James Loudspeaker in San Clemente, California. We've known each other for more than 15 years, going back to his days at Lutron. We're both Yankees and Georgia Bulldogs fans, which is a pretty rare combination for sports fans. I promise I won't turn this into a sports podcast because I really want to discuss an impressive new invisible style speaker from Sonance that I heard demoed the other day. Ari, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Great to be here, Jeremy. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. And I definitely want to just touch on what this speaker is that I'm talking about. It was something I saw, had an introduction virtually during Virtual CEDIA this year. And I was able to have a demo with your Midwest sales manager, Dan, is it Dusek?
Dusek.
Yes, Dusek, who gave me one of my first in-person meetings, which is always dicey these days, but we kept a safe distance, and I was able to get a technical breakdown on all the on the new features of this product, and I want to get into that later. But I first wanted to kind of get to know you better, or at least have our audience get to know you better. So, we kind of got to know each other, I'd say, about 20 years ago, maybe 15 to 20 years ago. Okay. We were at a CEDIA, if I recall properly, and I had dinner reservations fall through or plans fall through, and I ran into you and Jason Sloan, who's also at Sonance, obviously, at a CEDIA Expo. I think it was Indianapolis, and you guys were going into dinner and invited me along, and it was one of those moments where I went from knowing you guys as business associates to kind of becoming friends. So I just wondered how much you remembered of that night.
I remember it well. Jason and I have been working together at two different companies now for nearly 20 years. He's really tall, as you know, so it's always easy to find him. And he probably led that charge. But I remember telling some Lutron stories. So we might have just joined Sonance around that time, and got to get to know you a little bit better. And it was certainly one of the great CEDIA memories of just not being a salesperson or a customer and just hanging out. It was really
right,
cool.
Right, and sharing mutual friends with Melissa Andresco, who Missy, I've known her since almost the beginning of when I started in the industry, and she's one of those people being on the PR marketing side who just really always made me feel connected to Lutron, and You guys worked together, so we shared some fun stories about her too.
Yes, absolutely. I remember her first day at Lutron right out of college, and working with her for many years, and she's just done an amazing job for Lutron as their spokesperson, and I'm really proud of her.
Yeah, absolutely. She's done great. Well, let's talk about Lutron a little bit, because obviously we were going to dive into Sonance here as we go. But I just looking back, you were there from 1995 to 2001, and then you went off to Columbia to work on your MBA, which is impressive in its own right. And then came back, correct, around 2003.
Pulled me back in. That's right.
Oh yeah. So you had planned. You didn't necessarily plan on leaving and coming back. That just kind of
That's right. Yeah. No, I going all the way back to my undergrad, I thought I wanted to do marketing someday. I kind of asked around, how do you get into marketing? Oh, it helps to have an MBA. How do you get an MBA? Well, you got to work first. And what should I do? And what kind of jobs? And somebody said something about sales. And I started looking when I was graduating undergrad from a little liberal arts college in upstate New York called Colgate University. Mm-hmm. And long story short is I found a New York Times ad for a job that did not list the company name. It just said a sales job in technology. I applied. I found out it was Lutron. I didn't know what Lutron was when I was a senior in college. And I remember calling home, talking to my mom and dad, and I mentioned it. And my dad said, I know that company. My dad was a food scientist, and he had been on a committee of scientists picking most innovative company of the year. And he had come to Coopersburg and interviewed and toured Lutron and met Mr. Spira. And he remembered it and said, he thought I'd find it interesting and I should go on the interview. And I did, and started at Lutron right out of school in 1995 in their rotational training program. And yeah, 7 years there. And as you said, I did leave. I was not planning to come back. Lutron didn't sort of push me to get the MBA. They felt like I could learn plenty there, but I had already had 7 years of work experience. I decided that I didn't know where I ultimately wanted to be and what I wanted to do. I didn't feel like I needed the MBA, but I just didn't want to ever be told, well, you can't have that job without an MBA. So I said, you know what, I'm just going to go, and I had saved some money, and I'm going to go full time. I did that for 2 years. And as I was graduating, the president of Lutron at the time, John Longendorfer, contacted me and Kathy Leslie and said they were getting serious about putting some more marketing teams together, and would I be interested in coming back? And we worked something out, and I rejoined Lutron coming out of my MBA in 2003, 2004 timeframe, and spent 2 more years at Lutron before I met the founder of Sonance, Scott Struthers, at an AIA convention in Las Vegas. And at the time, he was just starting to shift the company back to his roots of design, and asked around of what brands know the sort of are at the intersection of the A&D community, architects and designers, and the CEDIA community. Okay. And everyone said, well, Lutron. And so he came to that show hoping to meet some people from Lutron. And I was lucky enough to be introduced to him. And we've had a tremendous relationship ever since.
So it was kind of get to know each other, and then did a job open up after that, or did he pretty much say, hey, come to work for me?
If you know anything about Scott, it was I wasn't sure for quite a while. It started with show me around the booth, and I thought someone said he might be interested in a homework system for his house. So I showed him around the booth, but then he started asking me personal questions. So what do you like to do for fun? And I had just gotten married, if I recall, and we were about to go on our honeymoon. We talked about travel, and he stayed in touch for a few months. And later I found out that they had a candidate for a role already, but he was kind of keeping me in mind, and that fell through. And he called me, and I flew out and took the job shortly after.
So what was that first job with Sonance?
Yeah, it was the chief sales officer, which you already mentioned Jason Sloan. I mean, anybody who knows Jason Sloan knows he's a far better sales leader and manager than I'll ever be. And so right away I told Scott, if I come, there's someone else at Lutron that may actually be leaving the company at some point soon, and I'd be interested in staying together as a team. And we hired Jason about 3 months after I joined Sonance.
Okay.
We joked that it was a package deal, but it wasn't quite. And quickly, pretty soon after that, Jason took over real sales leadership. A few years later, I became the chief operating officer. And then in 2009, kind of at the depths of the recession, the CEO at the time, who came from another industry, went back to that industry. And I think they decided I would learn the rest on the job, and I became CEO in 2009.
Yeah, that's a pretty quick climb once you get there, it seems to me. I mean, it may not have been for you really. And
it was. I think there was a longer term plan, and I think that the timing of it all got accelerated with what was going on in the economy in the world, and the CEO at the time, Sean's decision to go back into the beverage industry. And I mean, I'm still learning today, so it's a long journey, but it's been a lot of fun. I learned so much at Lutron coming into the role, just how to take care of customers and how to take care of people, build teams and innovate, and just core values that I still hold true to today. And I think the biggest difference was when Jason and I came over to Sonance, there was no bureaucracy telling us what we could and couldn't do. So all the problems that we faced, which were in many ways greater than any problems we faced at Lutron, the difference was they were completely in our control to change. And there were certainly some bumps in the road. It was Jason and I joined the company, and culture changes from us coming from the East Coast and all sorts of things like that. But the company was well on its way to bringing out this sort of aesthetic design strategy already. And I think Jason and I came in right at the right time with our knowledge from Lutron and accelerated that, and built an amazing team. And we've had our executive team together now going on almost 10 years together. And the team that we have built throughout our organization is something that I'm incredibly proud of, and I think is the key to getting us where we are today, and that's what's going to take us into the future.
Well, I mean, two great companies, Lutron and Sonance, frankly, from my experience, but two completely different kinds of companies from a cultural standpoint. From my observations at a distance, I may be, exaggerating, but to be just kind of fair with it, I would say Lutron's more of a button-down type of environment, suit wearing,
Yes.
when suits weren't really being worn that often, and
Yes.
and then you go out to you're on the West Coast, you're in Southern California,
Right.
albeit in Nixon country, but still, it's a very, very different world when you're near the ocean out there. And I wonder, were the sizes of companies a lot different, or were they similar?
Completely different. I would say Lutron was probably 10 times the size of Sonance at the time I joined, somewhere in that range, maybe even more. And culture is certainly different. Yeah, I mean, there was actually a vicious rumor when I first joined Sonance that went through the sales force that I was going to be leading, that I was going to institute a suit and tie policy.
Oh boy.
The irony of it is that I hate wearing suits and ties. And I've had probably in 15 years, maybe 3 or 4 occasions, and unfortunately a few of those were funerals. So definitely I was excited to get into a more casual environment. And we at Sonance, we've really built a team that's very much a family, and it really feels that way. And it's just a different, more casual, not just attire, but in our interactions with each other. And something I think that we were able to build the way we wanted it to be.
Well, I want to definitely continue that part of our conversation about Sonance, but something we didn't really touch on, which I always like to talk about on these podcasts, is a little bit about a person's background before they even got into the industry, before even college. And what were you like as a kid? Were you science minded like your dad, or?
Yeah, I was. I was definitely science and math minded. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, though, which is what I didn't want to be a scientist. It was more about technology that I was interested in. And so I decided to go to a liberal arts college, which, looking back, I feel like was a great move for me, because I feel like what a liberal arts education did is it sort of teaches you how to learn. And it's not so much, I was a geography, sociology double major, not disciplines I use in my business career. But it really was a foundation of learning and working in teams. And then later in life, 7 years later, going to get the MBA, it was, all right, I need some hardcore business skills to add to my passion for the industry.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, an MBA is not that typical in the residential tech space necessarily, and there are more and more companies that are getting a bit more corporate sort of centric or professional in that way. So I don't want to overgeneralize, but what do you feel like that degree, that to go back to not only to get an MBA, but to get an MBA from an Ivy League school, which is a pretty impressive feat, I would say. What do you feel like that has brought to running an audio company, a loudspeaker company?
Yeah. I mean, what I wanted to do when I got my MBA is I knew I loved this industry, particularly the CI and its intersection with architects and designers. It wasn't like I need an MBA to do this job. I just didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't come back into the workforce and think I was somehow different and smarter, or somehow that my MBA specifically was going to help me. I think in many ways it's been more of a backdrop of thinking. I'll give you an example. Prior to going to get my MBA, I thought of marketing as a purely creative endeavor. And what I learned in business school is that there's a lot of math to marketing, and being able to do and product management and break-even analysis and all sorts of aspects of it like that. And I think the other thing I learned in school that has helped me is just how important leadership is and building teams.
Sure.
Those are the things that stick with me.
Okay.
Even though I went to a pretty hardcore finance school, I don't consider myself a finance guru. And I have an amazing CFO, Chief Operating Officer, Pat McGon, that we partnered with, and we complement each other really well, and been working together for, I don't know, 13 years now.
Great. Well, we'll dive right back into Sonance stuff here in a minute, but first we'll take a short break and continue our conversation with Ari Supran when we get back.
This episode of Residential Tech Talks is brought to you by Ring, home security systems and smart home automation. Get protection at every corner with their intelligent security cameras, alarm systems, and video doorbells. Receive notifications when motion is detected or check on your home anytime with Live View in the Ring app. Help keep your neighborhood safer with the Neighbors app to share information and discuss safety concerns in this hyper-local social networking platform. Ring's mission is simple: make neighborhoods safer. Discover all the smart home security products by Ring. Go to ring.com.
Welcome back. I'm talking to Sonance CEO Ari Supran. All right, I've teased the Invisible series speaker enough. I think we should kind of talk about that now. That's the latest development. We can continue talking about some of the philosophies of the company as well, but let's give the people what they want.
Yeah, sure.
What I was impressed with when I got the demo, I had been given a little bit of the background in my virtual introduction to the product. I've seen a lot of invisible. It's sort of funny. I've seen a lot of invisible speakers. I've had descriptions given of them. I've seen them at trade shows, and they're basically designed to be put into the wall where you can't see them. They're painted over the whole thing. And I'll let you explain it because you do it all the time. But this one, it sounds like a normal speaker when you're in the room. It doesn't sound like there's any compromise to the audio quality. And I just wondered if you could kind of explain how that's accomplished.
Sure. Well, I'm pleased you got both a effective and safe demo from our team. That's exciting to hear. It's been an adventure trying to get a product out, launch a product virtually, deploy demo kits out to our field team, being able to do safe demonstrations. A lot of them have been done outdoors, but we've gotten creative in many ways. But before talking a little bit about how we arrived at an invisible speaker that sounds the way it does, I mean, I think it's important to understand why invisible is so important to us at Sonance. You know, if you go all the way back to the creation of the company and Scott Struthers, and he didn't set out to start a speaker company. It was a design solution. It was about hiding technology and architecture. And fast forward, 38 years later, and we're, distilling our brand down, as some of you might know, we had used the name Dean Innovations for a little while, and we got back to Sonance as the parent brand over everything we do. And we defined what does Sonance stand for? And we came up with these brand pillars. The first and most important one is designed to disappear. And that's it's in our DNA. It's what propels us. And we had to ask ourselves, we might be maybe one of the largest manufacturers of designed to disappear audio, but are we the best? And, took a look in the mirror and said, there's some specialty manufacturers out there that do things that we don't. Sometimes it was some capabilities like customization, like the James Loudspeaker brand. And other times it was some specialty manufacturers who focused day in, day out on a category like invisible speakers. And quite frankly, had leapfrogged us in technology. It's something that we did as one of many categories. And so when we asked ourselves those questions, we quickly said, we need to solve these things if we want to maintain our position in the market and grow. And we asked ourselves, should we build or buy, right? Classic business question. And we had different answers for the two different things, right? For customization, to build it ourselves, there's a 15 years of history of database that James Loudspeaker has of all the custom products they've made. They have so many, not just the machinery, but the knowledge and know-how, the people, the team, the culture of craftsmanship and creativity that we don't have. We're not constituted that way to have a factory with a wood shop and a machine shop and a paint booth. And so fortunately, we were able to put that merger together, and we acquired James Loudspeaker the beginning of 2020. that deal took a while to put together. And around that time, about 2 years ago, when we were contemplating that, we set off on developing new invisible speakers and said, we don't need to buy. What we need to do is just give our engineering team the time to analyze, why is it that aspects of our current line of invisible speakers didn't perform to our own expectations, and what was the feedback we were hearing, and what was the competition doing. And ultimately, by giving them that time, we were able to take a very scientific, methodical approach to understand what the landscape was, and then to start building upon that knowledge, and using sophisticated technology in the development of the product, not necessarily just in the product, but testing equipment. One of the most important ones would be the Klippel laser distortion analyzer, and how we've always used that to produce, not always, over the last 6 or 7 years, to produce our traditional cone-based speakers.
Yep.
This is a device that magnifies the movement of the driver like 1,000 times, and using a laser allows us to measure how smoothly the driver moves, and how little distortion it creates, and be able to design the product using that tool. Well, that tool wasn't designed to be used with flat panel speakers like an invisible speaker. And so our chief speaker designer, Todd Ryan, worked closely with Klippel, and we, in a proprietary way, modified that tool to be able to be used with invisible flat panel technology. I think that was one of the keys to unlocking how to get full range sound. And ultimately, through that development, I'm so pleased by this, because, while we do have competitors in lots of different categories, we try to keep a sort of an infinite horizon, right? It's not about beating the competition. And when I joined the company, it was kind of a Coke and Pepsi with Speakercraft. And, if we had stopped when we felt like we had maybe surpassed where Speakercraft was back in 2008, 2009, or wherever, what would we do next? And so I don't like to think about it in terms of competition. And when we asked our engineering team, clearly we needed to give them enough time to make sure we did beat whatever invisible speakers were out there. But we set a bigger goal. How do we make an invisible speaker that is no compromise acoustically? And how do we do it with better installation, or an easier way to install it, or a more scientific way to verify whether it was installed correctly? Because even with the best invisible speaker, if it's not installed correctly, i.e. they put too much topping compound or mud on the face of the speaker, you're not going to have the same result that you're expecting. And so by giving our team that time, we were able to develop a product that we believe, and let me be clear to all your listeners, don't take my word for it. Call your Sonance rep and get a demo. It has to be heard to truly be believed of what we can do. And when we give a demo, and I'm not sure if this is the way you got your demo, is we're not just playing a pair of invisible speakers. We're not playing it against the competition. We're playing it against our flagship 8-inch VP, or Visual Performance VP86 speaker. And we're comparing our invisible speaker at roughly the same price point to a completely visible speaker. And it absolutely performs in a similar way, arguably even more bass with a larger diaphragm to move, clear articulate highs. And we're able to, some customers are saying it sounds better than a VP86. Some are saying it sounds as good. The fact that we're even talking about that, we feel is a win. And it's really, to us, not about taking market share from the other invisible speaker manufacturers, although I suspect some of that will happen. It's about expanding the market, about making products like invisible speakers and products like James small aperture speakers as the standard, as what integrators lead with when they're in high-end homes. And I think that's really the opportunity that we have in front of us. And that's the feedback we're getting from, initial returns are almost too good to be believed. So we're really excited.
One of the things that Dan mentioned to me that I hadn't realized was that you should think about these as a in-ceiling solution, and
Absolutely.
they really fill the room, and they clear the walls of any obstruction or problems. Because I always thought of them as an in-wall solution, the invisible.
The majority are done in ceiling. One of the main advantages of invisible speakers is because they're invisible, you don't need to line them up with lighting cans. You don't need to, there's so many advantages. And because of the technology, the dispersion is nearly 180 degrees. So if you have three or three pair in a ceiling of a large room, you don't need to have them all in a row aesthetically or acoustically, and they'll fill that room with even balanced coverage, creating a really comfortable listening environment, but still be able to, because they're highly efficient, be able to fill a large room with deep, full, rich sound. Before I forget, on the installation side, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big challenges there is the installer or a custom installer rarely is the one actually installing invisible speakers, right? Because a drywall contractor has to come in that works for the GC, and the integrator comes to test it afterwards. And if there is too much mud on the product, there's really not a way to have a quantifiable or scientific conversation with the contractor and say, hey, this is 4 millimeters and we need less than 3, let's say. And so we were looking for some ways to solve that. And, pre-COVID, I traveled back to New York area where I'm from, New Jersey originally, and made the rounds of the dealers there. And it's a big market for invisible. And I kept hearing that invisible was growing and taking share from traditional speakers. And one of those integrators, really pushed me on an idea that it's rare that at Sonance that we're able to take a customer's input and incorporate it into a product. But we'll shout out to Larry Abrams at Audio Interiors in Hop Hog, New York, who was one night we had dinner in the city and maybe caught some music afterwards. And he was poking me about this idea, which was to borrow some technology from the automotive industry of a depth gauge that could precisely measure the depth of a topping material on top of metal. And we were able to put some, we call it the Sonance disc system, embed into our invisible speakers in the corners, some discs that made up with a special sensor that's calibrated to measure the amount of topping compound over those discs. So if they've been installed and sanded and there's run a straight edge across it, that if they can take a measurement at 2 of the corners and they're both, let's say 1.5 millimeters and 1.8 millimeters, we got a pretty good idea that right in the center of the diaphragm, there's somewhere between 1.5 and 1.8 millimeters of topping compound. And so we were able to incorporate that into the product. And he wanted me to name it the Larry, but we decided to call it the Sonance disc system. And
good choice.
But thank you, Larry, for your idea, and we're excited to get it out there and enable integrators to have quantifiable conversations about whether the product was installed right.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw that part of the explanation during CEDIA, I was just amazed at the thought that went into that. So that's a great call by Larry, and then I got to see it in person and was even more impressed, and had frankly kind of forgotten about that part of the conversation because I knew from a performance standpoint it was supposed to be so impressive, and I was looking forward to that. I'm like, oh, that's the other thing that was so cool. Yeah. So
you got to hear sort of the workhorse of the line, I bet, because those are the demo kits, the IS8, but it's actually a line of products. There's an IS6, an 8, and a 10. And going up in size of woofer. There's also 2 subwoofer models, a new one that I think is pretty ambitious. We've got a 15-inch invisible subwoofer or woofer. And we expect that to not only be used with our invisible products, enabling us to recommend for the first time invisible speakers in a surround sound application, where we have not in the past. But also being able to pair that with visible speakers and be able to add bass augmentation low in a wall to in-ceiling speakers in the ceiling, but have an invisible woofer that just really changes the opportunities and options that integrators have.
Yeah, and we got a chance to visit, I guess it was over a year ago when I came out to your headquarters, your relatively new facility there. And again, it was one of those great memories because I was on my way in, and Mike Cleary, who works with you, called me to check on my progress and freeway traffic, which wasn't great, of course, because it's LA. And he said, "Don't worry, I'll have a beer waiting for you when you get here." And that to me was like the most welcoming thing I could hear at that moment in time as I sat out in this like arid desert looking area. And I know that's a cultural thing with you guys. You have this great facility. You host so many different people in non-COVID days. How are you doing as far as managing that type of part of your company where you really have this charm offensive that's really great? And you can't do it anymore. You turned off the beer taps,
Yeah, that's true.
It must be frustrating,
Yeah.
of all the big things that we're dealing with. But I mean, that must be a minor frustration for you.
It is and it isn't. I mean, we had made a major investment in, we call it the Sonance studio, and lots of integrators have come out and visited us from all over the world pre-COVID. And we had just, as COVID hit, we were getting close to, we're maybe halfway through a major remodel. You said, gosh, you just moved in. Why would you remodel? Well, with the acquisition of James Loudspeaker, we needed to really rethink some things and add James into the mix. And so, we didn't let up at all, though. Once COVID hit, we had a skeleton crew of our own construction team finish up much of that, and we're getting close to finishing the rest of it. But we really were able to pivot quickly to doing really like our national sales meetings. We did a live, it's not just a webinar, but like a television broadcast practically. And I think it was really well received. And so what we're now doing is doing live tours of the studio for integrators. And we've had a few times where integrators were either visiting Southern California or are based in Southern California, but maybe with an office someplace else, and to have one of their team members live in our studio, obviously wearing a mask and being safe, hearing the product, but the rest of them on a live Zoom watching the tour and hearing the reactions of their colleague that works with them. That mix has been really effective for us. Or one of our regionals, like Dan that gave you the demo, will go to an integrator, but then we'll Zoom into our studio for a deep dive and have a Mike Cleary or Jason Sloan walk them through where we've got all the props. And so combining that local, physical presence with the online, and it's really working well for us. And we had, again, lucky, we had started making the investments in a world-class videographer and photographer prior to COVID, and we leaned on him and built the team around him. Extremely talented team, and I think we're producing some of the best collateral we've ever produced, and being able to bring customers virtually into our building. It's not the same, right? There's no beer on tap flowing and those more casual conversations, but we're making up for it where we can, and obviously looking forward to getting through all of this and welcoming all of our customers and reps and partners back to our facility again, because as you said, it's that home court advantage is huge for us.
Yeah.
Because we get to not only demonstrate our products, but we get to demonstrate our people and our culture, and that's quite honestly that's what wins the day.
Well, and I also was pleased to have had a chance to meet the James team before they moved to their location when you acquired them. They're a unique group of people as well, and you mentioned the customization that they provide, and I was just wondering how that blend of team members kind of has been going since the beginning of the year when you acquired them.
Great question. So yeah, they had actually moved from Napa Valley to Minden, Nevada about a year before the acquisition happened. And one thing I can tell you is when they moved from Napa to Minden, they had 42 team members, and 40 of them picked up and moved with the company. And that was a big indicator to us that they had a strong culture and a team there, and that's exactly what we found. And I'll tell you, this lockdown and crisis and not being able to travel has certainly been a challenge, but at the same time, it's been an accelerant as well, right? We're all virtual, not all of us. It's a factory. We have a safe factory that we're running there, but the executive team, and we're able to have more touch points now. And so it's been going really well. Right away, they only had really one salesperson, Keith Park, and he's now kind of joined our sales force, and the Sonance sales team is working with Keith and managing both the James and Sonance and iPort and TrueFig brands with our manufacturers representatives. And so that integration was almost instantaneous. And our marketing team has really stepped up in creating new collateral for James. And those were some of the things that Mark Schafel, the president of James and my colleague now, that they just weren't going to be able to get to, right? Build out a sales force, build out a showroom, up their marketing game. What their core is all about, is hardcore engineering, manufacturing, customization, which, quite frankly, especially the manufacturing and customization aren't departments that we have. So there was no duplication of jobs. There was no massive layoffs there. And then I think going all the way back is understand why we acquired them. This wasn't the classic type of acquisition, maybe in the world, if not our industry, where one company's trying to borrow on the brand, or they're going to, we already have a great brand. We bought a team and capabilities, and we're pouring gas on those and doing as much as we possibly can to tell the world about what James is capable of. We're almost a year into the acquisition, and just this past month, it just ended, October, James had its all-time highest revenue of any month ever. And so all smiles all around on the team. And it's been an adventure trying to obey governor's orders, be safe, take care of our team, continue to keep our factory open through this crisis. We've done so safely, and we've been able to do it all along while bringing these two teams together into one team, and still giving back to our local communities. We have a philanthropic arm, and it's been growing during this crisis, as obviously there are so many people in need. But our merger has gone extremely well so far. I'm very pleased at where we stand today, and the market, more importantly, seems pleased with what we've done together.
Yeah. So just to close on a further positive note in a trying time, you've seen what I think a lot of us have seen, which is that people are reinvesting in their homes. Your opportunities with our industry to continue working through COVID have been helpful for a trade like this, and essential workers from the beginning there. So you're seeing more success on the residential side than the commercial side, though, correctly? That's kind of the one area where everyone has maybe seen a little dip, is the commercial side.
Yeah, so commercial is something that we got serious about 3 years ago, and developed a new line of products, the Sonance Professional Series, and we're doing extremely well. We were doubling our sales kind of year in, year out, and it was we really felt like it was going to be a major growth driver going into the future, and was going to help the whole company continue to grow. Our residential market was something we felt for Sonance was pretty mature, and we had our sights set on growing the James business. And then COVID happened, and sort of the tables flipped. And again, I keep going back to how lucky and fortunate we are. Of course, I think we've done a lot of good things to position ourselves well, but we got lucky in the sense that our residential business was far larger than our commercial business, and now it is truly booming right now on a sort of run rate basis. And yeah, I think that our commercial business we're over indexing because we were on our way to taking some share from some of the big guys in that market. But there's, I looked down our pipeline. It was bars, restaurants, hotels, airports, lots of places that hopefully will come back here in the next couple of years. But we got a small but really great commercial sales team, and a set of commercial reps, and I know we're still growing, just not at those rates that we had expected to.
And I'll close on the part that I said I wouldn't dwell on too much, which is our sports fandom.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
Clearly, I lived in New York for 11 years. You're from the New York area, so the Yankee fandom, that makes a lot of sense. I went to the University of Georgia. Your dad went to the University of Georgia?
Yeah, so my dad went to the University of Georgia for 3 different degrees. He ended up getting his PhD in food science there. And my mom went to Emory, and was all set to go to grad school up in Philadelphia when she met my dad at a wedding. And I think the story is about 7 days later, they got engaged, and she transferred to University of Georgia.
Okay.
And in 2017, unfortunately, my dad passed away right as the college football season was starting. But he said, this is the year, boys. And so my brother and I didn't go to major powerhouse football colleges, and so we just kept our Georgia Bulldog fandom that was probably imprinted on us by my dad and Herschel Walker in 1980, and when I was 8, and then through anyway, so 2017, when my dad passed away, my mom said, "Boys, I think Georgia entered the season 13th, and if they make the national championship, we're going." And wouldn't you know it, we got on a plane and met in Atlanta from 3 different locations, and went to the national championship game in 2017. And while they didn't win, and as you know, as painfully as I do, and lost in overtime, in some ways it seemed fitting, just because that's what my memories of Georgia football growing up was my dad always just being, just blinders on about how they're going to win, and always my brother and I getting excited and then being let down in the end. But we're still big Georgia fans, and always will be. But that's my connection to Georgia, as being a kid. My dad was from the Bronx, actually, and
wow.
Ended up at University of Georgia because they had a great food science program.
They do. They still do. It's a great place to go for that degree, and journalism for me as well. So it worked out really well. And me being a guy from Indianapolis, I was an odd fit down there as well, but it became another home, and it was great.
Yeah.
So it's a good school to root for, and we're hoping for one of these years to be surprised. I think it's going to be the season we don't expect, that they finally break through.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously the Yankees and the Bulldogs, our 2 teams, seem to get closer each year. Which one do you think is going to get there first?
Probably the Yankees, but I don't think anybody feels sorry for us as Yankees fans. No. But I'm just glad it wasn't the Astros this year. That's the only.
Without a doubt.
Yes. Nothing against the city of Houston, just that team was.
It was nice to see the Red Sox season this year. That was nice.
It was, yeah, that was nice too. Yeah. And I have no problem rooting for the Dodgers. It's been a while for the Dodgers.
I like to see them win. That was good.
Yeah. Well, Ari Supran, thanks for taking the time to chat with me.
My pleasure. Great to talk to you. Thank you.
Yeah, good luck with everything. And also thanks to everybody for joining us. Be sure to comment, share, or subscribe to the podcast. And you can check out all the latest residential tech news at restechtoday.com. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential tech talk, lighting specialist, residential tech.